to our live and leveling up baseball. We have with us today our lovely Lacey Simmons, who's the baseball mom of the century, of the universe, I think. And I'm Lynn Donaldson, the mindset coach. I get the honour of coaching young Kavanagh, who's Lacey's son. But what we want to do today is we want to talk about this thing about shiny object syndrome. And it's about the marketing that goes along with baseball, that you've got to have the latest bat, the latest glove, the latest pair of pants, the latest whatever it is, and the marketing that goes with it. So, Lacey, from your point of view, do you want to kind of talk about it from the mom's point of view? Or, you know, if you want to introduce yourself as well, please do. Please feel free.
Yeah, I'm always horrible at introductions. I'm like, I'm Lacey, I'm the writer, and usually just leave it at that. But it's interesting because part of this journey I appreciate as a marketer. So I'm a copywriter, so I help people sell things. So I can see and appreciate the irresistibility that can come with some of these new sports objects. So not even if it's in baseball, but I'm sure there's equivalents in football and soccer and gymnastics and cheerleading and all the things. But one of the things for me with Kavanaugh is I noticed that he had more than just a liking to bats. He had almost an obsession. And these bats nowadays, for any of those fellow baseball parents that are watching, those bats are expensive. So $250 to $450 or more, depending on some of the bats, especially if you get a custom bat. So to have a kid that's obsessed with baseball bats is probably equally as financially detrimental as someone that's obsessed with sports cars or expensive purses. And so at first, me trying to help him feel comfortable and feel confident. And to be honest, like, I never wanted him, as long as I could financially afford it, to not feel like he didn't have what he needed to be successful. So with that being said, I got suckered into the obsession. And I know there are several baseball parents who are probably watching who probably have had similar convincings where you end up paying more than what you probably ideally budgeted for sports equipment. But what I noticed with him is anytime he went into a slump, it was, oh, I need a new bat. It's the bat's fault. Or we would go somewhere, go for a tournament, and he might be a guest player, and he didn't have the batting outing that he wanted. It was the bat's fault. Or it was because he didn't get to have the bat for excellent. It was all these excuses around the bat. And so over the process of the past year, it's been kind of deprogramming him to understand that, yes, the bats and things that we buy can enhance our performance, but they aren't a prerequisite for performance. And that it's really looking inward to try to figure out, regardless of what bat you have in your hand, or even if it's a stick, your mechanics should stay the same, right? And not letting the tools that you're using impact, especially from a detrimental perspective, impact your performance.
And that's what, to be fair, marketing does. It constantly bombards the kids and the moms and the dads with, you've got to have this next bat because it's the one that's going to make your child stand out and it's going to make your child the best. And of course, these subliminal messages are going in. Well, they're not so subliminal, are going in all the time. And so it's really hard from a mindset point of view to not take that in. But you're right in terms of, it's not the be all and end all. They are simply tools and they are there to help. But it's a bit like, somebody having the lucky socks and they have to always wear their lucky socks. It's part and parcel of their own mind doing that. And if we can unlock that, and I know you've kind of got 3 strategies that you use to kind of combat that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I'll talk about one of them. I don't highly recommend you necessarily follow the path that I did because it was a little brute and rudimentary, but it was the best that I could do. And I think in the last live we talked about really navigating like this intergenerational difference of maybe how we were raised or how our coaches did things when we were growing up versus really trying to meet this new generation where they are. And I totally get Kavanaugh, I believe, is a Gen Alpha. So I totally get like in this space where he's grown up with Instagram and social media as really being your personal brand, right? Being your sense of identity. And so trying to meet him where he is, in the sense that there is some perfectionist qualities I think that we are breeding in this younger generation of athletes, where they don't feel like they can fail because they don't want that posted on social media, or it's not going to be content for the gram, as they say. So trying to meet him in that space of knowing that there is this societal pressure of perfectionism, but then also creating opportunities for him to fail.
Yeah.
Well, for what it is, to safely fail. And so one of the things that I did when I started to notice that he was using the bat as a crutch is, I didn't have this on my notes, but it just came to me, is having him take acknowledgement, right? So when it was, oh, it was the bat's fault, or oh, it's because I didn't have enough time to break the bat in, all of the things you could possibly, it was, the bat was cold, all the things that he would come up with, is that it was actually allowing him to use it as a scapegoat.
Oh yeah.
And so we really practice on, at the end of any game or practice or even a hitting lesson, just debriefing. How did it go? What could we have done better? Because there's always something that we can do to improve, even if it's just listening or coming in with goals. There's always something that we can do better. But getting him in that habit of debriefing, and it was okay to say I wasn't 100% today for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so to detach the sense of performance from his sense of identity, because what was happening is he wanted to find a scapegoat or something else to blame, because he felt like if he took ownership over the lack of performance, it was somehow going to make him a bad person or a horrible athlete. And so really coaching him through that process of, in order for us to improve, we got to take accountability, and blaming the bat is not where we start. Right.
Yeah, and
I
that's
don't know if you want me to go through. Yeah.
oh, sorry. That's where your brain's actually coming in to sabotage you, in terms of it's giving you a reason. And when you're in a blame culture, you're not actually taking accountability, like you say, and that can lead you down a spiral. And I saw Kavanaugh do it a couple of times, where he would go down this blame and guilt, and it just puts you into a negative mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what you did was detaching the tool from the outcome. And also, like you say, on social media, they are on 100%. We all know that Facebook, people only show generally their good side.
Right.
They're not going to show their vulnerability. They're not going to show when they mess up. They're not going to show when they've had a really, really bad day, because people don't. Even the most vulnerable people still don't do it, because it's that impression and that brand that you say. But the fact that you managed to detach the things, the bats and the performance, as it just was, and what did you do right and what did you do wrong, that was a really great way to go, because he's now looking at it from a totally different viewpoint.
Yeah. And then I think what I've indirectly been able to do is help him really embrace imperfection, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing is going to be perfect. And if we think about the best TV shows or the best movies we like to watch, we actually like to watch the imperfection. As much as we don't want to showcase it on social media, we don't also typically like to watch a movie where everything is butterflies and rainbows, right? We want to see kind of that story arc of, from underdog to hero. And so I'll just do one little quick plug for Kavanaugh's Instagram. He's on this journey of running 3 miles a day. He's committed to losing 25 more pounds in 2025. And he's definitely well on his way 9 days into the year. And so when we're at home, he walks around with his shorts on and he might not have a shirt. But typically when we do something, we might record it for Instagram. I've been cognizant of like, oh, put a shirt on. Right. And so today he's like, I think I have my heat on 80 degrees because I don't like cold. So it's really hot in my house. And so he goes and we have a treadmill. So he's running on the treadmill. And so I'm like, I'm working, go ahead and make sure you get content, so you can post and you can, help take people on this photo and video journey of your, you running. And so he's like, oh, okay, I got the content. And so I happened to like look up from a meeting and I said, are you going to post the video with no shirt on? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, are you sure that's what you want to do? And I actually had to kind of catch myself because I think that's me projecting my own insecurities potentially. But I'm like, and he said to me, he said, what happened about the whole thing that we've been talking about embracing who I am? And he said, of course I'm going to post with no shirt on. And it's because I'm not ashamed of my body. Now, would I want my body to be better or more in shape or more sculpt or more fit? Yes. But in this moment, I'm not ashamed of it. And he said, and in order for me to appreciate where I end up, I need to know where I started. And I'm like, okay, that's one of those moments where you reverse roles and your child becomes the parent and you become the kid.
Yeah, he got you.
I was like, okay, you got it. But yeah, but the essence of what he learned and what he displayed today on his Instagram came from those discussions of it's okay not to be perfect. You're going to have a bad, old, new, used, whatever, and you're going to strike out, right? You're not going to have the performance you want hitting wise. The guys in the big leagues do it all the time, and they get paid millions of dollars. That's their job, and they still sometimes air quotes fail at it. And so it's been interesting to see how that journey of him taking accountability and ownership and owning the imperfection has spilled over to other parts of how he shows up in his character and what he does. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
One other thing that I'll share, and then I'll toss it to you, is one of the ways that we got him. He still has a slight bat obsession. I'm sure if I had an unlimited budget, he would have every bat out there just to even try them. But where I got him to understand that he controls the bat doesn't control him,
Mm-hmm.
is that I would start to unexpectedly hide things. So it actually started by accident where, we do a lot of traveling and we shuttle from bats in suitcases to bats in my trunk to bats in my garage to bats all over the place. And so this particular instance, we had just come back from Texas, I believe, and he had a hitting lesson. We drive to the hitting lesson thinking that the bat is that his favorite bat is in the trunk. Get to the hitting lesson to realize, oh crap, it was actually in the garage. So we have bats in my trunk because there's some that he refuses to ever swing because they weren't the nice shiny object anymore. At one point they were. And so I'm like, hey, you got 3 bats in the back. Grab a bat, go in and do the lesson. And so there was like a 5-minute negotiation where he's like, no, you need to cancel the lesson. I can't do the lesson because I don't have my bat. Like this whole uproar. And I'm like, that's not an option. You're going in here, pick a bat. It's a bat. Just pick a bat and go swing a ball. It's a training lesson, right? It's not a high stakes situation. It's not the World Series. Just go in and just do the lesson. And so him having to force himself out of that mindset of being that attached to the bat was kind of the first step that we took. So I've been recreating that oops the whole time. So he has a plethora of bats, some of them brand new, some of them relatively new, some of them used that I got from secondhand stores. And so he may never know which bat is available or in the trunk or supposedly in his bat bag. And I will have gone in many times and taken bats out of his bat bag just to break him out of this emotional attachment to the bat so that when he shows up at a training lesson or at a practice and the bat you thought you had is not there, how can you adapt to change?
Yeah.
How can you adapt to something that's unexpected? Are you going to allow that to emotionally destroy the rest of your day, your performance? Or are you just going to say, okay, whatever, and just move on? So it's been this journey the past 6 months. I'm sure he hates it. At this point, he probably is immune to it. Of, okay, I don't know what's going to be in my bat. And in some cases, it's a surprise, right? It's a positive surprise. Oh, there's my hype fire. Great. But it's detached that sense of dependency. And that was the only way that I could think to kind of do that so that he could see it doesn't matter the bat. You got all the skills inside of you. You got all the training in the world you could ever ask for. Lean on your mechanics. Even if the bat maybe is heavier or lighter than you expected, what can you do to lean on to that's foundational that you know is going to help you get through no matter what?
Exactly. Because I think last time you mentioned, what happens if the bat breaks during the game?
Right.
You can't use that bat. And it's that fear, that underground fear of failure that freaks you out, or the fear of the unknown. So swapping out the bats is a really good thing to do. I'm sure a lot of parents listening will be like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's do the old bats, the new bats, and interchange them, because then the child doesn't get, the athlete, should I say, not child, the athlete doesn't get so dependent, like you say, because our brain is still trying to sabotage us.
Right.
And getting that dependence on a thing is what kind of keeps us safe. The brain is trying to keep us safe to some extent. And so it attaches to things. But when you take that attachment away, you throw the brain back into this turmoil again. And it's like looking for the safety again. But if you can get Kavanaugh, like you say, safe in any situation so that he's adaptable, the fight or flight or freeze doesn't come in. He's just like, oh, well, whatever. Because your brain gets used to the constant change. And let's face it, in this world, the only thing that's constant is the change. So getting him used to that in games and in life, and as you've said, he's already sort of exhibiting that in general life in other things he does. That's really good because it's taken away that fear of failure. And Kavanaugh and I talked about failure and how failure can actually be a good thing, leading to something that's better. But at least he's not thinking failure when he picks up the wrong bat and going into fight, flies or freeze. He's just like, oh, that's another bat. Fine, let's go ahead with it. Do you do the same? Does he have a lucky pair of socks or his lucky hat that he wears, or
We will be lucky to find a pair of socks in my house. So he typically attaches to his bag. He's now kind of like meandering down the path of like having a favorite glove, so to speak. But I'm like, hey, having favorite things or even having habits or rituals, pregame rituals, that's totally fine. It's just a matter of how quickly can you adapt. And so it's been interesting to see him evolve and be able to adapt. And in some cases, reminding me of, okay, remember, you got to adapt when I'm sitting there freaking out in the middle of a crisis. So it's been cool to see. But I think for me, the biggest thing as a parent that I try to always reiterate too is not coming from a doomsday perspective, but I always tell him you got to have a plan B for the plan B. So if that back breaks, what are you able to do? How quickly can you move on? How quickly can you adjust? In the same way that if you can't find your glove, what are the other opportunities that you have to make sure you can still be successful? Can you borrow somebody else's glove? Do you want to pack an extra glove in your bag just so that you always have one? Keep one in the trunk. So really getting him to think through, how can I plan and almost anticipate places where I might fail and create this safety net for me where I know that I have something that I can rely on without going through a world feeling like I have no control, because that doesn't feel good either.
Well, it'll derail him as well. So in a game, it'll derail his next swing or his next innings. Not innings. You can tell I don't play baseball.
His next at bats, but yeah.
But it could derail that, and that was one of the things I think when I first started coaching Kavanaugh was he was great in practice, but when he actually got to the game, he wasn't quite hitting the same, and it was because he got very safe in his practice but wasn't adapting to the actual game, and it was freaking him out. Now it's completely different, isn't he? He's comfortable in either game or practice, but it's that fear that always holds us back. So I'm sure a lot of mums out there will be very pleased that you've kind of got rid of that whole shiny object syndrome, and they can do that as well. But as we've said before, it's a combination of the parent and the coach, and coaches who are coaching on a technical side should be teaching these kids as well, to these athletes as well, to use different tools and not stay with the same thing. I think you mentioned about when the Kavanaugh was in practice and when it's the machine, the safe. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that kind of really illustrates that whole concept of imperfection, right? Embracing imperfections. And we always have that moniker of practice makes perfect, but I'm actually a big believer that imperfect practice makes perfect. Because when we say practice makes perfect, Kavanaugh would go into a batting cage, and depending on the day, we could be 2 to 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours at a batting cage, and that's in a single day. And so what I notice is, of course, like with anybody, right? We like to be able to do things where we get that instant gratification, right? We like to see that green check marker, that approval. And so he'd go into a batting cage and put it, when we first started this journey, he would put it on a speed that he knew he could hit. And it was probably slower than what he would actually see in game. And so, I'd say, well, why do you have it at 40 when you're going to be seeing pitchers throwing at 50, 55 or 60? Oh, this is just warm up. And I realized for a while it wasn't warm up. It was just a place that felt safe for him, because he's like, oh, I get the instant gratification of hitting the ball and hitting it well because it's going super slow. And I'm like, but that's not going to help you in a game, right? It's going to feel great in practice, but I can guarantee you it's going to feel 10 times worse in the game when you stand there and you look like a deer caught in the headlights. So then we got him to bump it up. Okay. So at least start hitting at what you normally see in the game. If not, hit at a higher speed, right? So now you can get used to it. So when you get in the game and you have that person that might be a 6'12" because they are out there throwing crazy heat, you're able to hit it because you're used to practicing that way. So that was one of the things of like being able to lean into that failure, because practice is the best place to fail. And then we had to move from getting him from the speed where he wasn't just doing something that was safe to now Kavanaugh is, depending on who you ask, some people will say that he has, what was the word? I wish I could remember the word. He has an impeccable ball choice. That's how some people would say. Others would say he doesn't swing at anything that's not perfect. Depending on who you ask, right? Some like I've heard the positive side of, oh, he has a lot of control, and I'm like, okay, that's a good way of looking at it. And other people will say he's too picky, right? We had a coach that actually cut him from the team, and one of the feedbacks he said was he was too picky at the plate. I tend to disagree, but the point would be that, at practice, he would look for the perfect pitch. And if it wasn't exactly down the middle, exactly where he wanted it, not too inside, not too outside, he wouldn't swing. And I'm like, this is now at practice where you're not going to have those
Mhm.
perfect pitches during the game. If we do, that would be great. But we also have the factor of the
Yeah.
umpire, right? The umpire may decide that what he thinks is a perfect pitch, you can't swing at, or vice versa. What you think is a perfect pitch, the umpire might, if you're pitching, might call it a ball. And so getting him in this mindset of, even if this is practice, let's swing at those ugly balls, because those ugly balls might be what you have to swing at a game, because you do have the umpire that could be all
Yeah.
over the place. Or what Kavanaugh would tend to do is only do practice with fastballs, which is a particular type of pitch, and he can crush fastballs, no problem. But when he gets into a game, most pitchers are throwing him
Uh,
curveballs. And so it's like, do you want to continue doing practice that makes you feel great and then go into a game where you're not fully prepared because you haven't practiced on those pitches when you know they're
yeah.
coming? And so I've gotten to a point now where when he goes to those batting cage, he's actually looking for ways to make it harder so that he is failing, so that he knows where he can continue to improve and level up, so that when he does get into a game, there's very few scenarios he hasn't already practiced and seen, right? The perfect, the imperfect, and everything in
Yeah.
between.
And that's I think to one of the points was his confidence beyond the tools and his practice in terms of the perfect practice. Because if your life doesn't show us perfect all the time, it throws a lot of curveballs. And in baseball, like you say, you don't know the umpire, you don't know the pitcher, what they're going to do, and being adaptable and being able to move, and that is Kavanaugh's done a great job of getting over that, and you with him coaching him, and that's why it's important for the parent like you to really work with their athlete, because he's really got over that sense of fear now of, if it's not perfect, what am I going to do, or I'm just not going to do it. He'll either swing at it or he won't. I'm sure he's got a little bit better at swinging at ones that are not so perfect.
He's gotten pretty good. And even like on, I believe it was Sunday, one of the interesting things about parenting, and I'll say this as an aside, it forces you to realize your limiting beliefs.
Oh yes.
Because sometimes what I find, if we take the time to do this self-reflection and be fully self-aware, there are some things that we project onto our kids that are not
Mm-hmm.
theirs, right? It's all of our stuff from childhood, from whatever. And so I say that to say, on Sunday, Kavanaugh went to the batting cage, and typically he hits by himself. And part of it is we go so late in the night that most people aren't there. So he's usually, let me rephrase that. I'm used to him only hitting by himself. So we go on Sunday, and it's only one machine, and there's like 4 guys that are already hitting, and they range in the age from 12, but the 12-year-old is he's a beast. He's almost like a 15-year-old. 12 to someone that's already like in college. And so I'm like, well, Kavanaugh, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I'm just going to go in rotation with them. And there was a moment where I was like, no, you can't.
Really?
And then I looked at him, I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, why not? And he was like, well, if the 12-year-old is hitting it, I can figure out how to hit it. And I'm like, okay. So the mom in me was like, the protective mom in me was like, no, we'll just wait. We'll just wait. I don't want you to be embarrassed. We'll just wait. And then the other part of me was like, no, let him go in there and let him see what he can do, right? He has to hold his own. So there was like, for me, this mental battle back and forth of like, do I let him go? Do I not let him go? And then he looked at me. He was like, it's okay to feel, right? At least you're listening. At least you're listening. So he goes in, and he like, not only did he hold his own, and again, they were not adjusting the speed. So you got speed going fast enough where it probably wasn't as challenging for that college player, but it was enough of a workout, right? And so they didn't adjust the speed. The only thing they adjusted was the height, because he's a little shorter than the other guys that were hitting. But you wouldn't have known, other than just, the height differential, you wouldn't have known the age difference. And so I left that session. I'm like, Kevin, I'm really proud of you. And he was like, why? And I'm like, because like me, I wouldn't have done it. Even if I was super confident, there would still have been a nagging thought like, no, don't do it. Like, no, don't do it. Maybe today's not the day to do it. Next time you'll do it. He was like, no, I needed to get my work in, and I wanted to be respectful of your time. So the only option we had was for me to go in there. And I knew that I could do it. And so I'm like, there you go. And so it's one of those things, as parents, as caregivers, as people that are around little ones that we're kind of helping navigate this world, is really rewarding to see it come full circle, where all the things that we teach, they're then embodying it and making it their
You
own.
make a great point there about what our limiting beliefs are that pass on to children. There are things that were passed on to us from our parents. I mean, you used to play baseball, didn't you? And what other sport?
I played
Oh, sorry.
basketball.
And what
Yeah.
was there occasion where your mum, that sharp intake of breath when you said you wanted to do something, play with the older kids or something like that, that you can kind of almost see it coming full circle?
Yeah.
But that's the thing, we pick up things from our parents, and that's why it's so important that at that point we give the child the opportunity. I mean, he did it himself, which is absolutely awesome, and like you say, so proud of him for doing that, because he just stepped through his fear.
Yeah.
And we, as we get older, we actually get held back by our fear, because we now know. I mean, relating to even Warrior, your little one, she has no fear, does she? Too much fear.
No, not at all. Yeah.
But
No.
then when we start seeing things, we put things on, don't do that, you're going to fall.
Yeah.
And, if we can let them go, especially in a safe situation like that, and just let them go and let them run, that will help Kavanaugh to get over any fears. You just go for it and see what happens. And we've tended to lose that as adults. That's what holds us back. Do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? Oh, I'll do it another day. Just like you said.
Yeah. And then to bring it completely full circle, he goes in rotation with the guys and actually uses some of their bats. So like that, completely detached from like, okay, I don't even need my bat. I'm going to put myself in a situation. I don't even know how it's going to go. I don't know how fast this ball is going, but I'm going to figure out how to hit it. And I'm going to use somebody else's bat.
Oh.
So I was like, it's a win-win all the way. But it's really important. And for those parents, or those people that have the ability to influence, athletes, to really encourage them to really embrace that sense of imperfection, right? Because we create these attachments because we think we need them to be perfect. And then the more we can help them embrace the sense of imperfection, the more that they'll venture out and try new things. Because we can't try new things and perfect new skills if we aren't comfortable with failing.
Well, no, and a lot of the great inventions have actually been through failures.
Yeah.
And failing until they got where they want to. And a lot of even the most rich amongst the population have always failed a number of times, and found out and used it as a tool to learn. And that's exactly what Kavanaugh did. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but next time he gets a curveball like that thrown at him, he'll know what to do, because you're rewiring your brain so that you're almost saying, I know. It's a bit like muscle memory when you go to the gym.
Yep.
You're rewiring it to say, oh, that's I've seen that before. That's fine. I can handle that. And even if it's not exactly the same, your brain can sort of partially think it's going to be the same. So what did the coach at this event, was the coach pretty good at interchanging and helping Kavanaugh do that? Or did Kavanaugh just decide?
It was just like a batting cage. So there wasn't a formal coach, but he just was like, hey, can I hit with you guys? They were like, all right. So they figured out the rotation, and that was it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, it was good to know. And then he gets in the car and he was like, I prefer to hit with older kids anyway. I'm like, okay, hey, look.
Yeah. Kavanaugh likes stretching himself. He likes stretch goals.
He does. So I'm glad that we can get to a place where we're breaking free from that bad obsession, so that he can feel confident no matter what, and no matter what bat he has in his hand, no matter what glove is in the bag, no matter what uniform is on his body, like, just to be so self-aware and self-sure and confident that he can do what he needs to do, and he has the tools to be successful.
Well, it's also the same because he does a lot of guest playing, doesn't he? So it's the same thing. He doesn't worry about the team. He's part of the team, but he can adapt into any team and play and support, because he's done it so many times that he just rolls in and is part of the team, as long as they're welcoming him. But that's the similar sort of
Right.
thing where giving him all these opportunities, and it's about opportunities and possibilities. The more opportunities you can give your children, the better they will be, because then they'll decide what fits and what works themselves, rather
Mm-hmm.
than you saying, oh, you must do this and you must do that. Again, back to what you're saying, based on our own beliefs from our parents, they can
Right.
figure it out themselves what actually works.
Yep.
So what do you think, in terms of the bigger picture for parents? What do you think is the role you play as a parent over and above the fact that he is your child? In terms of being an athlete, what part do you think you play?
Yeah, I think the biggest part that I find that I keep coming back to is
Mm.
accountability. Is really teaching him that sense of accountability. So whether it's taking ownership over a poor performance or being accountable for the goals that he has, so that when he's going into a training session, he's not just waiting for the trainer to tell him what to do. He's coming in saying, "Hey, here's what I would actually like to work on. How can you help support me in that goal?" And so when we equip our athletes with the ability to hold themselves accountable and to also hold others accountable too, to helping them in their journey, then that's really where they're able to maximize the resources they have and get the most out of it, right? Because you can imagine if you were just a passive passerby in your own life, how you would just wallow away depending on which way the wave flowed, versus really taking control and saying, hey, here are the resources I have, albeit even if it's limited resources, here's what I have, and here's how I can get what I need to support the goals that I have, and I can then hold myself accountable to doing two things: one, getting those achieving those goals, and then two, being resourceful to use the resources I have at my fingertips to be able to level
Yeah,
up.
and I know you do a lot of research and you go the extra mile for Kavanagh. But one of the things is, if there are parents out there who don't have the time or the money, one of the things that you can do is to help your child be adaptable. I think you mentioned about children in other countries who adapt to what they've got, and they just
Yeah.
use what they've got. They may only have one back between five of them, but they still make it
Yeah.
work. And so,
Right.
for there are different levels, and this is about parents just doing what they can with what they've got, and and the
Right.
athlete doing what they can with what they've got, because they may turn up. Who knows? The snow could damage all their bats. The snow could do something, and
Right.
they've got to go back to something that they didn't want to use before. But at least if they're adaptable through the
Right.
teaching, and having that mindset of, it doesn't matter. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter what I'm using, which bat I'm using. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. I'm still going to be good because I'm going to do my best.
Right.
Is that the young
Right.
athlete coming back?
Apparently. Yeah. But I guess we can go ahead and bring this to a close. I know we've had a great discussion for the past 30 minutes or so. For those of you that have watched our previous live streams, like Lynn and I are working on a community to really help you not just take your athletes training to the next level, but also give you really in-depth insights in terms of strategies, in terms of mindset, things that you can do both as a parent and as potentially a coach, of your child. And then also from the athlete perspective, so that you can get that competitive edge. Because I know my kid has a dream of making it to the MLB, and I'm going to do my best to support him in that goal, no matter how far it takes us. And like Lynn mentioned, I'm spending probably 15 to 20 hours a week for the past year researching things, just because I kind of geek out on that stuff. So this is my kind of contribution back to the youth athlete space, is to really create a community where those of us that have really big ambitions, like, I think a lot of times we get afraid to admit, talk about, discuss our big goals that we have for our kids, or the big goals that our kids have for themselves. And I wanted to make a community and really create an atmosphere where we can talk about those big goals. If your big goal is for your kid to get drafted out of high school, like, okay, let's be in the community. Let's figure out how we can support each other and helping that goal and that dream come a reality.
Exactly. And if the goal is that I just want to have fun, fine, that's still a goal. Whatever that that athlete wants to do. But like you say, if we can help them progress by providing a community that everybody can learn from one another, but we can help you with certain trainings and certain ideas and some of the mindset tools that we've brought to table, and some of the strategies that Lacey's employed, because she's worked through a lot of things. And the idea is that we make it easier for you because we've worked through a lot of these things. And so if you can just take it off the shelf and work with it, so that you don't have to go through the 8 months or a year of learning the learning curve. That's the idea behind it. Awesome. Thank you. So it's probably about time to get the children back home, something to eat.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for spending this time, Lacey. And what we'll do is just a quick note. Ashley said Kavanagh's a beast at bat and on the mound. So he's awesome.
Amazing.
But we'll put out some information on the program that we're building. The idea is really about helping and supporting parents, coaches, and the athlete themselves. Awesome. Have a great night, everyone.